The House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Nathaniel and Ava Larkin, grandchildren of Representative Peniston, and from Holmstrom Options District 12, Adams and Adams.
Please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kohler, please take the roll.
Representatives Becker, Buckner,
Let's take some pictures. Hold on.
Conti, Coram, Court. Representative Court President Del Grosso.
Yeah. One more.
Dorr. Duran. Everett. Absent. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Representative Foote.
I saw my dog absent.
Absent. Garcia. Gardner. Giroux. Janal. Hamner. Holbert. Hollinghorst. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Representative Kagan. Ah, there he is. Kraft Tharp. Representative Kraft Tharp. Labuda. Representative Labuda. Labuda.
Absent.
Absent. Landgraf. Lawrence is excused. Lebsock. Lee. May. McCann. McLaughlin excused. McNulty. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane. Representative Labuda is present. Salazar. Schaefer is excused. Scott. Singer. Sonnenberg. Representative Sonnenberg.
He killed one. We don't need.
Sonnenberg?
He's here someplace.
I thought he has to be excused.
No. Absent. Stevens. Stevens. Absent. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Fairnew. We're done except for Foote, Sonnenberg, and Stevens.
I'm here, by the way.
Got it.
Sonnenberg and Stevens are
Yeah.
all absent.
Yeah, I got you. I see you. Yes. Yes.
With 58 members present, 3 excused. Actually, with 59 members present, 3 excused and 3 absent. A quorum is present. Representative Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the reading of the Journal for Thursday, February 27th be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Peniston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, you've already had a chance to meet my two charming grandchildren, two of the three, Ava and Nathaniel. I'd also like to introduce my daughter, Erin Larkin, and my son-in-law, James Larkin. Please help me welcome them to the chamber.
Representative Hamner. And Mitch Bush, are we doing the ski report or?
I'm doing something serious first.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay, I have two serious things. But the first thing is attention House Education Committee members. Monday afternoon, we'll have two bills in committee. One is the Student Success Act, House Bill 1292. Also, we expect the Speaker to read over the desk today the school finance bill. It doesn't yet have a number. So we'll have both of those bills Monday afternoon, and we will have them for testimony only. So we'll be laying over action on both bills. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up. Thank you so much.
Representative Hamner and Mitch Bush now for the
Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. It's Friday. We're reporting on the great conditions at all the ski areas, but I, being a very parochial person, will especially report on the 6 new inches at Vail, the 6 new inches at Beaver Creek, and the 7 new inches at Steamboat. So go up and go skiing. It's going to snow all weekend.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see you have your hands full.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that all of you recognize that Representative Mitch Bush and I are down here in Denver all week, and so we don't really know what's going on back up there in the mountains, but we can't wait to find out about the Summit County resorts, Mount Crested Butte, the Aspen ski resorts, and I forgot the name of my one in Leadville. Ski Cooper.
Cooper, yeah.
So we hope that you, like us, get out this weekend, get some exercise. Remember what we learned yesterday about Live Well Colorado and how important it is for us to stay fit and healthy. Hope you get out there and enjoy some of the snow.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on behalf of the most affordable ski area in Colorado, no jammed highways, and the opportunity to ski as a family and not lose your children all day long, Ski Monarch. Thank you.
Representative Peniston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, help me get out of the doghouse here. I can't tell you how often we forget to introduce the most important people in our lives, and my husband, W.J. Peniston, is here as well, so please welcome him to the chamber.
Representative, do you have an announcement? Or we'll wait till they do the tribute a little later. Representative Corum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two things to say. I'm not going to give a ski report on Telluride, Crested Butte, that area. I just don't think 6 inches is anything to get excited about. So, but I would request to be excused on Monday. I have talked to the majority and the minority leader. Thank you.
Representative Corum will not be excused or requested because of the bad joke he just made. Okay, fine. Representative Corum will be excused. Representative Lee or Representative McNulty.
Mr. Speaker, I ask to be excused today at 11 o'clock.
Representative McNulty be excused as requested. Representative Lee and Waller. And Conti.
Thank you,
Mr.
Speaker. We would like to welcome today the National Federation for the Blind. There are scores of them around the building. The National Federation of the Blind is joining us. Give them a big round of applause.
Thank
you. Representative Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'd also like to welcome the National Federation of the Blind here today in the House chambers. You know, members, I just wanted to say I had the opportunity to speak to the National Federation of the Blind over the summer, and as I was getting ready for that experience, I was talking to my good friend Kevin Worley, who happens to be over here on the left today. Mr. Speaker, that was not an introduction.
Yes, it was. That would be $2, Representative Waller.
I was saying I was talking to my good friend Kevin Worley, who just happens to be over here.
Just for the record, that was Lila who muted you. She already has good taste.
Oh, very good. Yeah, we were having a discussion, and I said, well, Kevin, you know what should I talk about when I talk about the National Federation for the Blind? And he said, Mark, I'm going to stop you and correct you right there. It's not the National Federation for the Blind. Nobody's doing anything for us. It's of us. It's ourselves working hard together. And I thought, you know what? Kevin Worley embodies everything that I stand for as an elected official, and that's creating an opportunity for people to be successful and then getting out of their way and allowing them to be successful on their own. I think my friend Kevin Worley embodies that principle perfectly. And I am so proud to have had the opportunity to get to know him and get the opportunity to speak to and understand the National Federation of the Blind. So please, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being such great leaders and teachers for us elected officials.
Representative Conti and Representative Waller, now that's $4 for the amount of times you introduced them.
Members, I just want to make a mention, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Federation does have a school in my district. It is a joy and an honor to have them. They're located very close to Arapahoe Community College. If you pass by that as you go up and down Santa Fe, they're right in that area. We see them frequently in our community, and it has been my honor to actually visit their school and learn about all the practical skills that they teach their members about how to live an independent life on their own. They need lots of volunteers, and so if there's ever a time that you'd like to help be a reader or a driver for the school, they'd love to hear from you. And thank you again for being with us today and allowing us to get to know you just a little bit better and learn more about what happens down here. Thank you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have one serious and one fun announcement. The first announcement is that the ATM downstairs we have found has a problem with it. Somebody can find out what your, what do you call it? They have a reader on it or a skimmer. They have a skimmer on it. So our chief sergeant has gone down to put a sign on it. Please don't use that ATM until you see the sign off, because it may be dangerous, it may be hacked. So please pay attention to that. And now, Mr. Minority Leader, Mr. Minority Leader, Mr. Minority Leader, would you please join me for a moment? Okay, as you all may recall, our minority leader and his lovely wife had a new baby just a couple of weeks ago, and we were remiss in not being right on top of it and ready to give him a gift. But today we would like to give him a gift from the House Democrats, and I'd like him to open it and look at it to tell us what it says on it.
Oh, I'll even take this out. This is good. And it's something that he can wear with me when he goes around to caucus on Tuesday night. It says, I love the 2014 Dems.
Further announcements and introductions. Representative Scott.
Thank you.
And Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have talked to the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader and asked to be excused on Monday.
Representative, I was waiting if that's the only one. You want Tuesday through Thursday?
Now that you mention it, no, I'm sorry. Just Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, that would be Tuesday also.
Right, Tuesday
Yes,
as well?
Monday and Tuesday.
Representative Scott will be excused as requested Monday and Tuesday of next week. Representative Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Talking to our expert, wonderful staff, Kathy Hahn, yesterday, you know, you guys are drinking a lot of coffee and it costs money, so if you have not contributed to that fund, please do so. We don't want the staff here making up because the reps are a bunch of slackers.
Representative Swan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I've talked with the majority and minority leaders, and I would ask to be excused Monday morning beginning at about 10 o'clock.
Representative Swan will be excused as requested.
Thank you, Madam.
Representative Buckner.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm going to be joined in the well by the other Aurora delegation. I'm here today to pay tribute to some outstanding Aurora citizens and people who have personally contributed a great deal to my success in my life. Often people don't understand that they are the product of many inputs. For example, my parents were really important about establishing standards and providing me the love and support that every parent intends. My wife, who's here today, has spent the last 45 years trying to round off some of the rough edges that I've developed. She's been successful at some and not so successful at other. Another group of people who you meet and pay tribute to are people that you meet as an adult that just by their sheer presence and personality impact who you are. And two of those people for me were Edna and John Mosley. Lieutenant Colonel John Mosley, who is a Tuskegee Airman, a successful member of a variety of different federal positions while here, and certainly a leader in the city of Aurora. Edna Mosley, who was the first African-American female to be on city council in the city of Aurora, is here today joined by her former city council colleague and current mayor of the city of Aurora, Steve Hogan, and she also was a tremendously important person in my life. Edna, one of her major accomplishments was that she was on the board for the redevelopment of Fitzsimmons and is responsible for getting the beginning of the campus for CU Medical Center started in that area. John has been a leader in the city of Aurora forever, supported me throughout my career, and I feel that it's just absolutely necessary for us to pay tribute to such a great man. The other people here all have their stories to tell about John and Edna Mosley. Mine is very personal. I appreciate them greatly and want everybody to know that. They're accompanied today by their son and daughter, Eric, who is followed in his father's footsteps and is a pilot also, and their daughter, Edna, who are here today to support their parents. And so I give you John and Edna Mosley. I appreciate your time.
I have to share a story, if I can, from this position. right now, but I do not want to miss this opportunity to let the Mosleys know how their legacy has helped me as an elected official. Excuse me. Ms. Mosley, I just want you to know why you served at the City Council. I watched your dignity. I've watched your grace. I watched how you were able to build coalitions and you were able to get work done for the city of Aurora, and I will always remember that. And for your dear husband, I know that you guys have been married for a very long time, but I have a very strong relationship with Colorado State University, and I know that your husband, I understand, was the first football player that played at CSU. And so whenever I hang out at Fort Collins, I always see you guys there, and I just want to say thank you so much for the legacy that you've left, not only for me as an African-American woman, but for people around the city, around the state, and around the nation. We love you guys so very much. Thank you for being here. And welcome the Mayor of Aurora, Mayor Hogan.
Seeing no more announcements, introductions, we'll move to our next order of business. Third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Kohler, I lost my calendar. Please read whatever the first bill is up.
House Bill 1100, Representative Swam and Pabon, also Senator Grantham, concerning the use of title documents to give notice of characteristics of motor vehicles and effective vehicles value in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1100 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1100 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Buckner, Conti, Kagan, and Priola. Representative Conti. Representative Conti excused and fined $5. Oh, sorry, Representative Conti, you were here. Now, Representative Conti, let's see if your button works. Let's see if it works. Try pressing your button. Representative Conti, how do you vote? Representative Conti votes yes. Close the machine. With 59 aye votes, 3 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1100 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 76.
Senate Bill 76 by Senator Tocktrop, also Senator Becker, concerning the creation of a hard rock mining permit issued by the Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety for mining operations disturbing no more than 5 acres of surface area.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 76 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 76 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 76 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions.
Seeing no objection, the House will proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to SJR 6.
Senate Joint Resolution 6 by Senator Jones, also Representative Exum, concerning the Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot Firefighting Crew and in connection therewith, honoring the service and sacrifice of the 19 members of the crew who lost their lives on June 30th, 2013 while battling the Yarnell Hill Fire in Arizona.
Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move SJR 14006 and ask to be read at length.
Whereas the Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot Crew of the Prescott, Arizona Fire Department, the Granite Mountain Hotshots, was founded as a fuels mitigation crew in 2002 and became the first municipal hotshot crew in the United States. And whereas hotshot crews are intensively trained wildland firefighters that are placed in the most rugged terrain on the most active and difficult areas of wildfires. And whereas the Granite Mountain Hotshots are an elite ground firefighting crew which hailed from diverse backgrounds and worked long hours in extreme environmental conditions while performing physically demanding fireline tasks. And whereas when large wildfires occur in Colorado and elsewhere, firefighters come from near and far to render assistance. Such was the case with the Granite Mountain Hotshots, who, since becoming qualified as an interagency hotshot crew in 2008, assisted on the following fires in Colorado. The Coal Creek Fire in the BLM White River District from September 2nd through September 4th, 2011. The Hay Fire in the BLM White River District from September 4th through September 5th, 2011. The Karen Place Fire in the BLM White River District from September 5th through September 11th, 2011. The Reservoir Road Fire in Larimer County from September 13th through September 19th, 2010. And whereas Colorado owes a debt of gratitude to the Granite Mountain Hotshots for their service to the state. And whereas on June 30th, 2013, 19 members of the Granite Mountain Hotshots gave their lives battling the Yarnell Hill Fire in Yavapai County, Arizona. And whereas the loss of these 19 firefighters makes the Yarnell Hill Fire the worst wildland firefighter fatality incident in the United States in 80 years. And whereas the 19 members of the Granite Mountain Hotshots who lost their lives are Eric Marsh, who was 43 years old and a native of Ashe County, North Carolina, served as the crew's superintendent. Jesse Steed, who was 36-year-old and a native of Cottonwood, Arizona, served as the crew's captain. Clayton Whitted, who was 28 years old, was a native of Prescott, Arizona. Robert Caldwell, 23 years old, a native of Prescott, Arizona, and the cousin of Granite McKee, who also perished battling the Yarnell Hill Fire. Travis Carter, 31 years old, native of Prescott, Arizona. Christopher McKenzie, 30 years old, native of Hemet, California. Travis Turbyfill, 27 years old, native of Prescott, Arizona. Andrew Ashcraft, 29 years old, native of Prescott, Arizona. Joe Thurston, 32 years old, native of Cedar City, Utah. Wade Parker, 22 years old, native of Chino Valley, Arizona. Anthony Rose, 23 years old, native of Zion, Illinois. Garrett Zuppiger, 27 years old, native of Phoenix, Arizona. Scott Norris, 28 years old, native of Prescott, Arizona. Dustin DeFord, 24 years old, born in Baltimore, Maryland, and raised in Acalica, Montana. William Billy Warnicki, 25 years old, native of Hemet, California. Kevin Wojcik, 21 years old, native of Seal Beach, California. John Person Jr., 24 years old, native of West Lynn, Oregon. Grant McKee, 21 years old, native of Newport Beach, California, and the cousin of Robert Caldwell, who also perished battling the Yarnell Hill Fire. And Sean Misner, 26 years old, a native of Goleta, California. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, commend the bravery and sacrifice made by the fallen heroes of the Prescott Fire Department's Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot Crew, extend our deepest condolences and sympathy to the surviving families of these 19 firefighters lost in the line of duty, and express our appreciation for the service of the Granite Mountain Hotshots to the state of Colorado. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to Eric Cryer, Prescott, Arizona Interim Fire Chief, Michael Morgan, President of Colorado State Fire Chiefs, Paul Cook, Director of the Division of Fire Prevention and Control in the Department of Public Safety, Sheriff James Casillas, President, County Sheriffs of Colorado, Mike Rogers, President, Colorado Professional Firefighters, Steve Trujillo, President, Colorado State Firefighters Association, Todd Richardson, State FMO, Bureau of Land Management, Colorado State Office, Willie Thompson, Fire Director, U.S. Forest Service, Rocky Mountain Region, Paul Serta, Superintendent, Alpine Interagency Hotshot Crew, Sean Telford, Superintendent, Craig Interagency Hotshot Crew, Bob Oyette, Acting Superintendent, Pike Interagency Hotshot Crew, Jay Godson, Superintendent, San Juan Interagency Hotshot Crew, and Larry Money, Superintendent, Roosevelt Interagency Hotshot Crew.
Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please be seated, members. Today we pay tribute to 19 members of the Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot Crew who lost their lives on June 30th of this year while defending the town of Yarnell, Arizona from advancing wildfire. You may ask why we wish to call attention and honor the sacrifice of these firefighters who died fighting a fire in another state. The answer is simple. Wildfire respects no jurisdictional boundaries, and when large wildland fires occur, firefighters come from near and far to render assistance. Such was the case in the Granite Mountain Hotshots. Since becoming qualified as an interagency hotshot crew in 2008, the Granite Mountain Hotshots assisted on several fires in Colorado. An interagency hotshot crew is a hand crew of 20 firefighters specially trained in wildfire suppression tactics. Hotshot crews are considered an elite group among wildland firefighters due to their extensive training, high physical fitness standards, and ability to undertake difficult, dangerous, and stressful assignments. They often respond to large, high-priority fires and are trained and equipped to work in remote areas for extended periods of time with little logistical support. As an interagency resource, hotshot crews can be requested to respond to wildland fires incidents in any jurisdiction. Currently, there are 107 hotshot crews in operation in the United States, organized by diverse agencies such as U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as state, county, and city governments. In fact, the Granite Mountain Hotshots of Prescott, Arizona Fire Department was founded in 2002 and became the first municipal hotshot crew in the U.S. The Granite Mountain Hotshots symbolize every firefighter we send out on the fire line, whether they are local, state, or federal, career or volunteer, or whether they are wildland or structural firefighters. Every year, over 100 firefighters are killed in the line of duty in the United States in the line of fire, and every year the death is studied to determine if there are lessons to be learned. We consider this no longer acceptable. Firefighters and public safety must always take precedence over property and resources lost. And while this wasn't a factor in the loss of the 19 members of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, we have an obligation to ensure that our firefighters are properly trained and equipped, and we must no longer expect them to defend the indefensible. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your time, and thank you, members, for listening. I ask for an aye vote on SJR 14006. Thank you very much.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I rise in support of SJR 14006. This summer, I had an opportunity to participate in the Fire Academy 101. And some of my colleagues in this chamber also went through that Fire Academy 101. And to go through that exercise for a day and put on the equipment, go through some simulations of putting fires out on the second floor apartment, to go into a basement of a home, to go into the second floor of an apartment and carry a 175-pound dummy down and do the CPR and get into an ambulance. And while I know that this doesn't even compare to the ultimate sacrifices that firefighters make every day. But what I want to share with you, it was just an incredible eye-opening experience to all of us with the sacrifices that our firefighters make and what they do to protect our lives every day. So in memory of the Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot Crew and all the firefighters who have made this ultimate sacrifice, I'd like to share with you the firefighter's prayer. So when I'm called to duty, God, whenever flames may rage, give me strength to save a life, whatever be its age. Help me embrace a little child before it's too late, or save an older person from the horror of fate. Enable me to be alert, to hear the weakest shout, and quickly and efficiently pull the fire out. I want to fulfill my calling and give the best in me to guard my neighbor and protect his property. And if according to your will, I have to lose my life, bless with your protecting hand my children and my wife. So in memory of everyone who is a firefighter who has taken the ultimate sacrifice to protect us in the state of Colorado and across the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Exum, for bringing this bill. You know, this is something that comes back near and dear to my heart. First of all, as a simple country legislator whose district is 70% federally and state-owned, most of which is forested. You know, we're in contact with a lot of these hotshot crews throughout the summers. They come in from everywhere. We see them in town buying supplies, and we always thank them for their service because they are truly putting their life on the line. Now, as I recall, this group lost their life because of a tragic error. Communications failed. You know, we had 19 members lose their life because the radios were not working. You know, that's something that I just can't fathom in today's world of technology, how something that can happen to cause these lives. You know, I spent many years as a winter resident in Arizona and well aware of the area where they lost their life. It also reminds me of when I will travel through Glenwood Canyon later today, and every time I go through there, I think about those young men and women that lost their lives in that fire. So I truly thank you. I appreciate what you've done, and just say a prayer for these people. Thank you.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Exum, thank you for bringing Senate Joint Resolution 006. Even though this tragedy happened in Arizona, for those in the fire service, when anyone dies from the fire service, being a brotherhood and a sisterhood, it hurts all the hearts, regardless of where you are in the country or the world, when you hear about the tragedies. And when you hear about 19 firefighters dying in one event, that heartache is 19 times worse. And you feel it even a year later. We pray that there's no other loss of life because of the circumstances like we saw in Arizona. But we also know that those that are firefighters, like we heard in the prayer, are willing to give that up because they feel that it's their duty to all of us to protect us. And so I ask that we pray and continue to pray, not only for the firefighters that lost their life, but the families of those firefighters who lost their life, because that heartache for them will continue for years and years from now. And we continue to pray for every firefighter today that will put their life on the line. And we thank God for what they do, and that there are people out there who are willing to sacrifice their tomorrows so that we can have our todays. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection taking a voice vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed in that manner. All those in favor of SJR 6 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. SJR 6 is adopted. Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the current roll call be added as co-sponsors to SJR 006.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be made the co-sponsors of SJR 6. Representative Exum for introductions.
Just a couple of introductions here. Bob Ayotte, he's a member of the Pike Interagency Hotshot Crew. And I wanted to also introduce the chief of my former fire department, Chief Riley from Colorado Springs, and the rest of the firefighters from around the state. Will you stand and members, please welcome them.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over SJR 11 to the end of the calendar.
Seeing no objection, SJR 11 will be laid over to the end of the calendar. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to HJR 9.
House Joint Resolution 1009 by Representative Williams, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning a request that Congress restore the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move for the adoption of HJR 14-1009 and ask that it be read at length.
Whereas the Colorado General Assembly has always supported the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended and its legacy of protecting American citizens. And whereas the Voting Rights Act was one of the greatest achievements of the civil rights movement and helped to not only allow equal access to the ballot box, but to facilitate advancement in other areas of life for minorities across the country. And whereas Congress passed the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution in 1869, giving black men the right to vote, but attempted and actual barriers to political participation remain consistently introduced in capitals and Congress even today. And whereas in 1964, fewer than 7% of eligible black citizens were registered to vote in Mississippi, and by the end of 1966, that figure had risen to nearly 60%. And during the same period, Alabama voter registration rates climbed from below 20% to over 50%. And whereas the so-called Jim Crow laws of the South made voter registration and election rules more restrictive, intentionally reducing political participation by minority voters with the use of poll taxes, literacy tests, and record-keeping and identification requirements. And whereas in 1964, only 5 black citizens held seats in Congress, with none from any southern state, and a total of 94 black citizens served in all legislatures. And today, the Congressional Black Caucus has 43 members, while over 600 African Americans hold seats in all legislatures, with another 8,800 being mayors, sheriffs, school board members, and other elected officials. And whereas 47% of these public officials live in the 7 states originally covered by the Voting Rights Act. And whereas voter turnout in the South dropped drastically due to segregation-era voting laws, and as a result, by 1910, not a single black voter was registered in 27 of 60 parishes in the state of Louisiana, and black voters were completely eliminated from the rolls in North Carolina from 1896 to 1904. And whereas in a 5-4 decision in June 2013, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional, which section sets forth the formula under which states and jurisdictions must seek pre-clearance from the United States Department of Justice before enacting new voter laws and regulations or making changes to existing laws. And whereas the pre-clearance provision in Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act relied on the formula contained in Section 4 to protect the voting rights of all citizens. And whereas Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in her dissent to the Shelby County, Alabama v. Holder case, stated, "Just as buildings in California have a greater need to be earthquake-proofed, places where there is greater racial polarization in voting have a greater need for prophylactic measures to prevent purposeful race discrimination." And whereas, prior to the United States Supreme Court's invalidation of Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, federal district courts in several pre-clearance states, including Texas, Florida, and Alabama, ruled their proposed voting law changes unconstitutional. And whereas sufficient data has been established from numerous studies and surveys that could serve as the basis for a new formula, including data found from calculating the overall size of the minority population, voter turnout among all groups, the number of voting discrimination lawsuits, as well as number of cases that have been lost or settled, and the prevalence of racially polarized or biased voting as a factor in voter preferences. And whereas Congress has repeatedly extended the Voting Rights Act, which was first passed in 1965 and then reauthorized for 5 years in 1970, for 7 years in 1975, and for 25 years in 1982, and Congress renewed the act in 2006 for 25 years after holding extensive hearings from which they found persistent racial discrimination at the polls. And whereas when the Voting Rights Act passed in 2006, it enjoyed wide bipartisan support and was signed into law by President George W. Bush, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that the Colorado General Assembly urges and requests members of Congress to update the formula in Section 4 of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended as quickly as possible to ensure Section 5 of the Act can be restored and every citizen's voice is heard and every vote is counted. Be it further resolved that a copy of this joint resolution be transmitted to the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the members of the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate, the Congressional Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women, and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HJR 14-1009 is regarding a request that Congress restore the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended. Recently, a small bipartisan group of congressmen band together to introduce the Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2014. And as some of you may be aware in the chamber and already know, the legislation proposes that Congress revise the criteria that determine which states must pre-clear changes to their voting laws through the federal government. One of the more prominent and very active Voting Rights Act bashers, Aaliyah Shapiro of the Cato Institute, called the amendment effort a bad idea. He actually manages to suggest that the dangerously anti-civil rights ruling on the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court last year vindicates Martin Luther King's dream. As you know, one of the crowning achievements of Dr. King's drive for equality for all Americans was the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What I find concerning is that we're even arguing about the voting rights at all. This nation is at a very changed place on this discussion. If we're such a post-racial America, then why are we putting together so much effort, so much sweat, so many resources into completely dismantling one of the more essential and effective American tools ever created to keep our democracy intact? The fact that we're actually fighting over the Voting Rights Act in the 21st century is both bizarre and it's embarrassing. Here we are, the world's most powerful democracy, and the shining city on the hill, as Ronald Reagan called it, and yet we're squabbling over the exact degree to which citizens should have the right to vote. It's bad enough that our founding fathers did not even include the right to vote for our citizens of color in the first place. Bad enough that it took the deaths of over 700,000 Americans, near destruction of this great union, the assassination of a great president, and the desperate passage of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution to introduce something as simple and fundamental to our democracy as a right to vote. It's bad enough so many gave up so much just to pass the Voting Rights Act. Bad enough that our Congress must extend it. How ironic that we are here as a nation. We are arguing over whether or not to strengthen the historic Voting Rights Act, yet our national voter turnout rates barely average 60% during a presidential election and just over 40% in a congressional election. Yet we have countries like Austria, Belgium, India, and Chile, and others have voter turnout rates that are nearly 90%. I've been such a proud Coloradan and a member of this body. Over the past couple of years, we've successfully pushed back against efforts at passing restrictive so-called voter ID laws. I hope that we will continue to make certain we are creating voting standards that are the envy of the free world and the laws that ensure that every eligible citizen, regardless of their race, regardless of their income, regardless of their circumstance, has every available means at their disposal to vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The years 1964 and 1965 were one of the most pivotal and important years of the 20th century in American history. My parents described this time period as exciting, tumultuous, and scary. The cry of civil rights could be heard throughout the streets of Denver as far north as Greeley and as far south as the San Luis Valley. Cases like Brown versus Board of Education set the stage for a massive social movement that was poised to change the face of our nation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination in many areas such as employment and places of public accommodation. But it was the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that tipped the balance toward racial equality. The Voting Rights Act allowed for the mass enfranchisement, let me say that again, mass enfranchisement of racial minorities to vote throughout the country. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 followed the 15th Amendment of our U.S. Constitution, which explicitly limited states' power to determine voter qualifications by providing that the right of U.S. citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state or on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a pushback on poll taxes, literacy tests, and other Jim Crow laws that were designed to disenfranchise voters based on their race and color. This monumental piece of legislation enfranchised Black and Latino voters. Poll taxes and literacy tests were not exclusive to just one racial group. They were being used against both groups to suppress the vote. In fact, here in the Southwest and in California, same ideas were being used to suppress the Latino vote. Poll taxes, literacy tests. In fact, cries of those devices to be used once again were heard in the 21st century. Unfortunately, this past summer, sitting at a 50,000-foot level, our Supreme Court felt that one of the most important provisions of the Voting Rights Act was invalid. But the Supreme Court isn't on the ground. They're not in the communities. They're not in the trenches. They're not in the Black and Latino communities. That's where the members are. And in 2014, we still have been fighting off attempts to disenfranchise voters. We ask that Congress restore Section 4, the heart of the Voting Rights Act. To be free from discrimination when it comes to voting just isn't an ideal. It is a constitutional right. And with that, I ask for your favorable support.
Representative Buckner for Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in support of HJR 1009. I've shared with this chamber a number of times that my family comes from many of the states that are governed or were governed under Section 4, including North Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. And in those states, the stories that I've heard from my grandparents and from my parents of how they were discriminated against is overwhelming. It's unbelievable at times. And to know that, unfortunately, my cousins and my peers are going through some of those same challenges just with a new face. We are overly incarcerated. We're profiled against. Economically, we're behind. And when you take away the voice, when you marginalize the challenge, when you exclude people from being able to have representation and get involved in their government by disenfranchising them in voting processes, then you cannot expect for that group of people to be able to move forward. And so I do ask that you support HJR 1009 and restore Section 4 back into the Civil Rights Voting Act. Thank you.
Representative Buckner. Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I rise in support of this. I grew up in South Texas, and when I was a little kid, I remember my parents struggling to scrape together enough money to pay the poll tax so that they could vote. That was a terrible thing that disenfranchised so many people. I urge support of HJR 14-1009.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to speak as a former county clerk who used to hang out with some of the clerks in the districts that are in question here. And it was a real pain to follow the law, and they really chafed under it because they were good, honest people. And they weren't doing anything and didn't have any intention of leaving anybody out, but they had to live under this law. And those of us who didn't have this restriction were really grateful because it's very costly, it's very time-consuming. If you miss a deadline, you're in trouble. And you know, at the time I thought, wow, you know, we've gone beyond this. We shouldn't have to do this anymore. And so when I heard about us discussing this morning, I mean, I immediately thought, we have a black man for president. How far we have moved in our country, that do we really need to do this? And yet I do know as a county clerk, there are ways that you can work the system in very small ways that could affect people feeling like they have access to the ballot box. So I'm delighted that there's conversation in modernizing the Voting Rights Act and finding a way to reinstitute it in light of the new ways that we do vote. But I'm not quite sure that we're ready to get rid of it. And hopefully in 50 years or so, we won't still be having this discussion. But let's all support this in the name of ensuring that there's total access to the right to vote in our country.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. And thank you, Representative Williams, and all of the members of the Democratic Caucus for sponsoring this resolution. It is an important resolution because the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was important. It was a sea change. As a member of the party that is responsible for the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, as someone who is cognizant, having been raised in a southern state, someone who's cognizant of the struggle and the cultural change that took over 100 years to bring about, culminating in the Voting Rights Act of 1965, I thank you. It's important to think about those struggles, and for most of us, those struggles are secondhand. The story that I remember best is my friend, Senator Ed Jones, who served in the Colorado Senate, and I managed his campaign, who told a story of being a young man in Mississippi, and when he was eligible to vote by age, going with another group of African American students and taking the test to vote, a test that, despite having studied and knowing the government and the voting rules better than anyone, if you were African American, you would not pass. And Representative Labuda, I too remember when I was a small child before 1965, going to the polls with my mother one day, and we went through, and by the way, this is the way you set the example for political participation for your children as you take them to the polls with you. And there was a moment there where the clerk was checking the book and say, "Let me see if you've paid." And I said to my mother, I must have been 8 or 9, "Do you have to pay?" And she said, "Well, you have to pay a poll tax." And I said, "Well, how much is it?" And she said, "Well, it's $5. Now, $5 is just sort of the fine for not making your vote here, but in 1963 or 4, $5 was probably a half a day's wages for my father. It was real money in 1965, and as I reflect upon it, my parents made a sacrifice to vote. It is something the Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed. And as I reflect upon it more, I realize that we were committed, my parents were committed in a new respect, that they kind of gave up a half day's wages to vote. There were people, Hispanics in our community, who clearly could not afford that. That was the difference between eating and not eating. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibited those kinds of voter suppression techniques. And it is important to understand in the discussion here, it is important for all of you to understand that the Voting Rights Act of 1965, many, many important elements of it that are concerning poll tax, active voter suppression and so forth, remain intact. What was at stake in the Shelby County case was the question of preclearance of changes in the voting system and voting laws. So if we would have been one of those states, House Bill 1303 or 1164 could not have been passed or could not have become law without the Justice Department telling us that that was okay. But Colorado does not have a history of racial discrimination. In fact, we're a union state, a Republican state during those years, and not really even a state, but a territory. And so we do not have that history of discrimination that required preclearance. The decision, which was a 5-4 decision, said Section 4A of the Voting Rights Act, which had a set of standards for when a state had to have a preclearance, Section 4A is 40 years old, and the standards leave a lot to be desired, and it's a political football, frankly, about what should the standards be or should they be. Chief Justice Roberts described 4A and then 5, which is the preclearance section, as being strong medicine, necessary medicine, but an approach that had been at the expense of the integrity, dignity, and residual sovereignty of the states. So there are competing interests here, and they are important and valuable. The approach of 1965 was, in the estimation of, I think, all of the Supreme Court, the right approach for 1965. The question becomes, and what this resolution is an important springboard for, is a discussion of what should the Voting Rights Act look like and what should those standards be, or should we even require preclearance for specific areas of the country versus other areas of the country. I want to say it, I think, a third time. The Voting Rights Act itself, the prohibitions against voter suppression, active voter suppression, and so forth, remain in place, and they are important. They are about things like active voter suppression and intimidation of voters and charging of poll tax. All of those things were themselves, without the preclearance provisions, were themselves an important and cultural change in America. So thank you very much for bringing this resolution. It is a springboard for a discussion about voting rights for all Americans throughout the United States and for those Americans who are outside of the United States and want to vote, for inner city voters, rural voters, minority voters, military voters, military-dependent voters who are outside of the states. And so thank you very much. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, which gave actual teeth to the 15th Amendment of my party, is important and continues to live, and we need to continue to have the conversation about what is the proper role of the federal government and what must the states do to ensure that all of our citizens have the right to vote and even the incentive to vote. Thank you very much.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also read in support of this resolution. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was not a historical event for me. I was a senior in high school when that happened, and was engaged in the political effort to ensure its passage. I did not grow up in the Deep South. I wasn't in one of those states that was covered by the formulas that were used to determine preclearance, although I would say to you that I needed to be in one of those states because the state that I lived in had rather inventive ways of ensuring that there were limited access and limited effectiveness for voters of color during that time period. the need to address the right to vote in this country certainly is an ongoing fight that I feel at some point we have to dismiss. Fundamental to a democracy is participation. And if we're going to participate in a democratic society, then we're going to engage all of the people. And whatever limits there are that we can come up with have to be dismissed. The debate about states' rights and voter inclusiveness is a short conversation for me. And so I rise in support of this and encourage us to support it as a body. And hopefully, when my grandchildren and your grandchildren have this discussion, it won't be about who gets to participate. Thank you.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I stand in strong support of HJR 1009, and I want to thank Representative Williams for bringing this resolution to us today. I stand here today because someone chose to fight and to struggle for my right to vote. And it's somewhat discouraging to me that in 2014, we still have to ensure and continue to fight to make sure that we have access to the ballot box. We've come a long way, but I think we still have a further long way to go in this country. I heard Representative Gardner talk about the discussion as it relates to pre-clearance. I think we still need the protection of pre-clearance because we still have discriminatory practices that exist. And so what happens is these counties that have demonstrated, or these states that have demonstrated these kind of racial discriminatory practices have to get clearance before they change any rules. I think that's a good practice to have in place because they have not proven that they can make these kinds of rule changes without making sure it doesn't disenfranchise the vote or the people. Voting is a very fundamental right of our democracy, and we need to make sure that it's convenient, we need to make sure that it's secure, we need to make sure that it is as simple as possible for eligible voters to get to the ballot box and to cast their vote. This is especially important for those who are seniors, those who are low income, those who are young, maybe those who are in rural locations, maybe those who are disabled, whatever the case is, we need to make it easy, we need to make it simple. I'm so proud to live in the state of Colorado because Colorado has a long legacy of being progressive when it comes to voting rights. In fact, Colorado was the second state to have full women voting rights in 1893. That's significant, because that was well before the 19th Amendment, which was done in 1919. When I mentioned earlier that I stand here because of those who struggled and fought and died for my right to vote, I read that in 1870, the Ku Klux Klan sought out and they lynched 3,500 African-American men lost their lives just trying to exercise their right to vote. Now, we have the Supreme Court decision striking Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, and to me, that's a huge setback. I believe that Congress needs to act now to restore Section 4. They need to update the formula, and they need to ensure that all voters, regardless of age, gender, race, sexual orientation, or disability, or geography, have access to the ballot box. I urge a yes vote on this resolution.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution as well today, and I think it is incredible to hear the stories of the past of when this was originally adopted by Congress. And when we think about the United States of America and thinking about some of the discriminatory practices that have occurred, it can be very challenging, but it is good to see that overall we have tried to work together to make sure that every American has a voice and a vote at the ballot box. However, I rise today in support of this because I think it is so important to not only recognize the history of the United States of America, but also to recognize where we are right now and where that future goes. And because of this provision that was originally adopted, there were, as late as 2012, because of growing numbers of the Latino community, particularly in Texas, there were actually redistricting plans that were struck down because they would be discriminatory under this provision. And so these struggles continue in a very different way. I think the conversation about the rights and the ability to be able to vote is one that we are seeing that affects many communities, including the African American community, but also the Latino community, with such growing numbers in the United States. If it wasn't for this provision, there also would not have been a very strict photo voter ID law in Texas that would have come forward. And because it was disproportionately discriminatory to the Latino community, it was blocked as well. So although the conversations as to where we got to before this in our history is incredibly relevant, we also have to continue to look at these provisions and these ideas to make sure that all communities are able to have access to our American process of voting. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is there objection to taking a voice vote? Okay, there is objection to taking a voice vote. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members, please vote on passage of HJR 9. Representatives Buckner, McNulty, Stevens, and Swan. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, House Joint Resolution 9 is passed. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine for co-sponsors. Close the machine. We will move to our next order of business. General Order, second reading of bills. Representative Rosenthal. You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the House will resolve itself in the committee of the whole for consideration of general orders. Representative Rosenthal will take the chair.
Will come to order. With unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the Majority Leader, and the court rule is hereby officially relaxed. Madam Majority Leader.
You're awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1042 and House Bill 1253 to March 3rd at the request of the sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the bills will be laid over at the request of the Majority Leader. All right, Senate Bill.
Ask Mr. Cole.
Oh. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 39.
Senate Bill 39 by Senator Balmer, also represents McCann Court, concerning grant of limited authority to emergency medical service providers to voluntarily provide pre-veterinary emergency care to certain domesticated animals.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 39.
To the bill.
Thank
Representative
you,
McCann.
Representative Rosenthal. Mr. Chair. Members, this is a great bill. Came out of committee unanimously, came out of the Senate unanimously. This is on behalf of our four-legged friends, as you might suspect, seeing the two of us up here. This bill will allow emergency responders, or actually it will allow the emergency responder organizations and departments to decide if they would like to be able to provide emergency care to dogs and cats when they respond to an emergency. So if the organization decides to do that, then they will provide training, and then the first responders will be able to provide just emergency, what we're calling pre-veterinary care, not full veterinary care, but they'll be able to stabilize your pets if they are injured in an accident or in a fire of something of that sort. It does not allow for ambulances to be called just to respond to an injury to an animal. But if an animal is injured in response to an emergency, then the responders can provide just basic stabilization in order to get the animal to veterinary care. So it's a great bill, and I would ask for a yes vote.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to remind you folks that this is another one of those bills that Senator David Balmer, who is also an animal lover, is sponsoring. He started in the Senate and brought it over here for Representative McCann and me to work on. I also want to let you know that he spent a lot of time getting all the stakeholders together, the veterinarians, the EMTs, firemen. You know, he worked on this bill, and we think it's a fabulous bill in excellent shape. And again, it came out of the Senate 35-0. It came out of Health Committee 11-0. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 39? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 39. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate Bill 39 passes. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1171.
House Bill 1171, Representative McNulty, also Senator Roberts, concerning rules on forensic medical evidence in sexual assault cases.
Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move House Bill 1171.
To the bill, Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, 1171 is a cleanup bill from the rape kit testing bill that we passed last year. I appreciate your support for that bill. I will appreciate your support for 1171. It was requested by the Department of Public Safety. It was requested by those who advocate on behalf of the victims of sexual assault. Ask for an aye vote.
Representative Kagan.
Thank you, and I would note for the membership that this passed unanimously out of the House Judiciary Committee, and I would also ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1171. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 1171 passes. What's the next one? Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 48.
Senate Bill 48 by Senator Guzman, also Representative Waller, concerning use of the most recent United States Census Bureau mortality table as evidence of the expectancy of continued life of any person in civil action in Colorado.
Representative Waller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 48 and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Kagan.
I would also note that this bill also passed unanimously out of the House Judiciary Committee, and I would also ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 48. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate Bill 48 passes. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
Seeing no objection, we will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Kohler, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, Committee of the Whole begs leave to report under consideration following attached bills being second reading thereof and makes following recognitions thereon. House Bill 1171 passed on second reading in order of gross place on the counter for third and final passage. Senate Bills 39 and 48 passed on second reading in order of revised to place on the counter for third and final passage.
Representative Rosenthal. Representative Rosenthal. There you go. There are no amendments at the desk. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote.
I believe so.
Representatives Becker, Coram, Exum, Fisher, Lee, McNulty, Janal, Murray, Pabon, Pedersen, Rankin, Williams, and Stevens.
We're going to do these. We aren't going to do floats.
Representative Stevens.
Yeah, they'll be here all day for that.
Representative Stevens excused and fined $5. Close the machine with 61 aye votes, 0 no votes, 4 excused, and 0 absent. The report of the committee of the whole is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the following bills be placed on special orders at 10:25 today, February 28th, and the bills are House Bills 1002, 1003, 1006, and 1293.
Seeing no objection, the bills listed as the Majority Leader will be made special orders as of 10:25. 10:25 as of rising. Representative Rosenthal. See no objection, the House will resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for consideration of special orders. Representative Rosenthal will take the chair.
Mr. Kohler, please read the. The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader, and the coat rule is officially relaxed. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1002.
House Bill 1002, Representative Young, also Senator Jones, concerning the establishment of a grant program in the Colorado Water Quality Control Act to repair water infrastructure impacted by natural disaster in connection with making appropriation.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1002 and the committee report of Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources.
Thank you to the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee report simply added some appropriations was already in there, I thought. No, this is 1006. Mr. Chair, sorry.
Representative Young.
The committee report from Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources simply updated some of the language that would allow this grant fund to allow grants for current water and wastewater projects. I ask your aye vote.
Is there further discussion on the appropriations? Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee report. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The committee report passes. Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a bill that came from the Water Committee, and it is designed to really focus on those projects that are going to help us recover from September's floods. Particularly, we want to focus on water infrastructure, both water and wastewater repairs. So with the support from the Flood Committee, we bring this bill forward and ask for your aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1002? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 1002 passes. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1003.
House Bill 1003, Representatives Nordberg and Sane, also Senator Kaffalis, concerning the exemption from state income tax of income that is earned by a non-resident individual working temporarily in state to assist with disaster emergency relief activities.
Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1003 and the Finance and Appropriations Committee reports.
To the Finance Committee report. Oh, to the Appropriations Committee report. Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just adds the appropriation to the bill.
Is there further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The Appropriations Committee report passes. To the Finance report. Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In Finance Committee, we just added a 5-year sunset to the bill.
Is there further discussion on the Finance report? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Finance report passes. To the bill. Representative Nordberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this bill just creates a non-resident disaster relief worker tax exemption. This is a Flood Committee bill and passed out there unanimously, and I would ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1003?
Great bill, vote yes.
Representative Sane?
Great bill, vote yes.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1003? All those in favor say aye. Oh, seeing that. All those opposed, no. House Bill 1003 passes. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1006.
House Bill 1006, Representative Singer, also Senator Lundberg, concerning the remittance of the marketing and promotion tax collected by lodging establishments in a local marketing district.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 10,006 in the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Appropriations Committee report simply clarified the Appropriations Clause, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The committee report passes. To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 10,006 helps clarify tax remittance for local marketing districts. It sounds pretty boring, but it's actually something that came out of the Flood Disaster Study Committee. When the flood happened in Estes Park, they actually had a local marketing district that helps make sure that tourists know that they can come and they're open for business. Because the local marketing district's remittance is quarterly instead of monthly, they actually didn't have the money to let people know that they weren't underwater anymore. It's a simple economic development bill, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1006? Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Singer, when we were in appropriations this morning, I asked you the question as to whether or not this would impact, if this would take all of the remittance requirements for the lodging establishments across the state to go from quarterly to monthly. I don't recall a clarification with that. Could you tell me, is it going to require all of the lodging, all lodgers within the state of Colorado to go from quarterly to monthly filing?
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Giroux. This was actually a question that came up in the Finance Committee as well, and we had Mr. Vecchiarelli from the Department of Revenue come and speak about this. It was also a concern that was brought up in the Flood Disaster Study Committee, and as a result of that, on page 2, we did have a clarification that says that that payment shall be monthly unless otherwise provided by law. And so this is something that we had vetted by a number of individuals, including John Nicholas, who's with the Estes Park Economic Development Commission, as well as Diane Monroe, who works with the Estes Park Partners for Commerce to make sure that this wasn't going to inordinately affect small businesses that don't remit their taxes quarterly anymore, or don't remit their taxes normally monthly because they don't have that kind of cash flow.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Representative Singer, what you read does not answer my question. It just says they may not. What is the mechanism whereby if I'm a small, say I'm the no-tell motel, but I don't do a lot of business because I own it, and so I don't remit monthly, I just remit quarterly. So when this bill passes, what's going to happen to me? And I certainly understand what happened in Estes Park, and I appreciate the sacrifices that they made. I had several areas in Jefferson County in my district that were impacted by the floods. But to the point, so I'm the proprietor of the no-tell motel. I don't have a lot of people that come into my establishment and rent rooms, but how am I not going to have to start filing monthly instead of quarterly? What is the process by which I will be exempted? Because the bill doesn't show that.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would go to the no-tell motel. As an architect, I'm sure you would have built a great motel, and so I would go there.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Singer is a house of ill repute.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we're in the House of Representatives right now, so I'll stick to that. And so, you know, what we could do, I'd be happy to have that conversation. Typically what the Department of Revenue does is they put out the FYIs that give instructions to businesses about how those taxes are remitted. My understanding, as it was explained to me, is that if your cash flow was not sufficient to be remitting taxes on a monthly basis, this would not change anything for you. If this language doesn't clarify that was the intent of the language. Like I said, it was vetted not only by our bill drafters, but by the individuals at the Economic Development Center in Estes Park, including John Nicholas, who actually works with the Small Business Development Center and has every interest in making sure that small businesses aren't attacked in any way.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Singer, I appreciate that because that's the first time you've said that. The point of it is that I know the Department of Revenue and I know how they operate, and I think you have a little bit more faith in them than I do. I would hope you would be amenable to a clarifying amendment for this so that perhaps maybe we could ensure that those small businesses don't end up being impacted by this, even though they weren't impacted by the flood, and they may not have the wherewithal. It's the cost of those accounting. It's the cost of the bookkeeping and the accounting to send in those forms because they are quite lengthy. And I'm not opposed to the intent of the bill. What I am opposed to is any unintended consequences.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and your point is well taken, Representative Giroux. If there's any other further clarifying language that does that, I'm amenable to any amendment that would clarify that for any small businesses. This was actually, just to point out in committee testimony, we had individuals that were with the Estes Park Partners for Commerce, as well as the director of the YMCA of the Rockies, which many of us have stayed at, as well as Elizabeth Fogarty, who's with the Estes Area Lodging Association that actually represents the large and small lodgers. No houses of ill repute, I promise, but the large and small lodgers in the Estes Park area, as well as Mindy McLaughlin, who was with the Loveland Chamber of Commerce and the Northern Colorado Economic Development Corporation. These are all individuals that look for people that are making sure that not only do we look out for the big businesses, but for the small businesses. And last but not least, I know I've mentioned his name a couple times, but he's probably put in more hours than I have on this bill, John Nicholas, who works with the Small Business Development Center and provides low-cost and no-cost information to small businesses as they're getting started. So the intent of this bill, it's going to be on the record. It's on the record here, and I would be happy to work with anyone on any amendment that would assure that this goes forward.
Representative Sain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I sure appreciate Representative Singer bringing this bill on board. I think this is a great bill. I'm open also to any kind of clarifying language as well that may make small businesses feel better. So with that, I think it'll be in the spirit of the bill. This is helping small businesses, especially in the flood-ravaged communities like Estes Park and Lyons. So I would urge a yes vote on this bill and on the amendment. Thank you so much.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I want to remind you this came out of the Interim Flood Committee. This is something that the merchants requested so that they could get up and running to make their advertisements faster so they could get business in sooner because they didn't have the money collected yet and it took them too long to let the rest of the world know, yeah, we're open for business. So this is what they requested. Now, I don't argue with Representative Giroux that there may be some need for tweaking here, but basically this is in response to the floods and the desire of the merchants in these local communities to have the opportunity to advertise more quickly. So again, there may be some tweaks we need to make, but we heard it in finance and recognized the value of making this change.
Minority Leader Del Grosso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I had some of the same concerns that Representative Giroux had. Being a small business owner and a person that has to remit sales tax, my my biggest concern and those questions that I had when I was in the flood committee and when we also heard this in committee as well is, okay, how is this going to affect those little folks that Representative Giroux had talked about? Because, you know, there is, when you go through and you remit sales tax, there is a process. You collect it. You have to fill out the paperwork. You have to go through that process. And it is kind of time-consuming and a little burdensome for businesses that are out there. And my big concern is those little folks that are currently doing it quarterly, now if they're having to do it monthly, is that going to be an extra burden on them? And actually, the majority of all those businesses, there was nobody that came and testified against the bill. The Chambers of Commerce actually came and supported the bill, and they actually said for a lot of them, well, it is kind of crazy for us because we're remitting our sales tax monthly, and then we're doing this quarterly, and so it's actually more of a hassle for us to do it the way that it currently is. So this actually, beyond just making it easier for the flood relief stuff, is it actually makes it easier for us as businesses as well to remit this tax. But Representative Giroux, you're correct. There are some businesses out there that remit their sales quarterly. And for those few folks, it's a pretty low threshold for you to submit your sales tax on quarterly. And if we want to further clarify that those folks that are there, I'm sure that I think we heard from the sponsors that would be okay. I believe that the bill does that, but if we do need some further clarification, I would support that further clarification. But those folks that are already submitting monthly, this just makes it actually a little easier for them. And going through that, I guess it would make sense, because when you're having to remit tax at 2 different times, it's a lot bigger chance that you're going to accidentally forget that quarterly. And the Department of Revenue isn't very forgiving. If you're late, they have a tendency to not be very nice about it. So those guys are saying if we can just line up when we pay all of our tax payments at the same time, it makes it a lot easier for all of us. So I don't know if we're still working on a clarification amendment. To do that, with the speaker or the chair, maybe might want to put us in a recess for like a minute or something. That would be greatly appreciated. Or if Representative Sane wants to speak, that would be great too.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And one thing I wanted to say about the bill, too, in context, is one of the things that I was told, and this makes perfect sense, especially if the system now may be more onerous with the monthly and the quarterly. One of the things I was also told is that with some of these flood-ravaged communities, so that they know what their income is ahead of time, they can advertise much quicker to the outside world. We're open for business. There are so many people that called in to the Department of Tourism and some of these small cities saying, I was anticipating taking my family on vacation to Estes Park. When will you be open? So this will certainly help those communities get on their feet quicker. So that's why I urge an aye vote on this bill.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify a couple things, actually, when the flood occurred, one of the things that the state government did is they actually made sure that flood-affected communities wouldn't have to pay their sales taxes right away if they needed to hold on to that money to help out. And a number of the businesses inside the local marketing district actually saw the value in paying their taxes on time to make sure that the money was going to come back and be able to be pooled in a way to assure that infrastructure improvements and improvements in marketing happened in an expeditious way. So just a point of information that I think would be really helpful for people to understand is the importance of this.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank Representative Singer for being so accommodating in this. Just so the body understands, besides having an architectural practice, I'm also an interior designer. And so if I do, say, a hotel project, and I'm contracted to provide the soft goods and the furniture for that project, I can go ahead and I will provide that. And I don't practice a lot of interior design. I primarily, my practice is primarily architecture. But if I have a large project where I'm collecting a lot of sales tax for that project, and then I go ahead and file on my quarterly basis, then if I turn around the next month, I'll get notice that I've been switched to a monthly filing instead of a quarterly filing. The difficulty of that is that that kicks me into a monthly filing that, in working with the Department of Revenue, I don't know what their rules are, but I know that I'm stuck in that monthly filing sometimes for a couple years before they'll kick me back into the quarterly filing. And what that means is that I need to make sure I do my bless you. I need to make sure that I do my filings, and when you're a small proprietor, regardless of your business, when you're trying to, thank you, sir, when you're trying to make your filings to the state, you want to make sure you pay your taxes, but if you know you're not going to be having to collect that much tax that warrants a monthly filing, it can be a nuisance for your business. With that, Mr. Chair, I move L001 and ask that it be displayed.
The amendment is properly before us. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this amendment does, members, is it does, as I was hoping the bill would do, it guarantees that if you're a small entity that's currently filing on a quarterly basis, you're not required to remit on a monthly basis. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is an amendment of impeccable repute, and I also ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment L001? Representative Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I am not an architect, but I support this amendment and this bill.
Is there further discussion on amendment L001? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of amendment L001. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. L001 passes. Representative Singer to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that lengthy but important discussion, I move House Bill 1006 and ask for a favorable recommendation in the name of all the folks that are still fighting to recover from the floods.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1006? Seeing none, all those in favor of the passage of House Bill 1006 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 1006 passes. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1293.
House Bill 1293, Representative Hollinghorst, All Center Heath, concerning payment of expenses of the Legislative Department.
Majority Leader Hollinghorst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I move House Bill 1293 and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In appropriations, there were a couple of additions to a couple of the line items. One for the Colorado Youth Advisory Council that was increased, and an increase for the State Patrol Capital Security, which was determined by the JBC and not available when this when the bill was drafted. So I ask for a yes vote on the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the appropriations report? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. The appropriations report passes. To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this bill makes appropriations for matters related to the Legislative Department for 2014-15 state fiscal year. And it also makes an appropriation to the Youth Advisory Council cash fund. Folks, this is our Legislative Department budget, which includes us and our staff and the Legislative Council and OLS and JBC and other Legislative Department-related activities. So I ask for a yes vote on this appropriations bill.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1293? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1293. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Noes? House Bill 1293 passes. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
And another thing too. Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Just being nice, waiting for Representative Holbrook to put his jacket on. Mr. Kohler, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, Committee of the Whole begs leave reports on the consideration of following attached bills being second reading thereof and makes following recommendations thereon. House Bills 1002 amended, 1003 amended, 1006 amended, 1293 amended. Passed on second reading and order gross space on calendar for third reading and final passage.
Representative Rosenthal. You've heard the motion. There are no amendments at the desk. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote on adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Representative Humphrey, Landgraf. Representative Stevens, is your button working? It might not. It is, okay. Representative Humphrey. Representative Humphrey is excused and fined the normal $5. At this rate, staff, the nonpartisan staff is going to be eating steaks at the end of session for how much you guys are paying. Close the machine. It's already, I closed the machine with 59 aye votes, 0 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent. The report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Announcements and introductions. If there are any. Maybe all of you want to just go home. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to offer everyone a free lunch at noontime downstairs in room 106. We have the Community Solar Garden Lunch and Learn. So come hear about community solar gardens, how you can have one in your community so you could buy a solar panel and hook into the renewable energy world. Thank you. 107, excuse me, I was just corrected. Room 107, 12 o'clock, lunch.
Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess till 1 p.m. this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until Monday morning, March 3rd at 10 a.m.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess till 1 p.m. Have a great weekend, everyone.